This video is of my build of this mahogany inlay table with a teardrop or feather motif. The first task was to make the inlay teardrops. I did this at the bandsaw, resawing the mahogany, coming up with something approximately 3/16 of an inch thick. I then ran these through the drum sander to clean up the saw marks. To cut both the inlay and the hole for the inlay, I use a inlay bushing and bit kit similar to this. First, I need a template to cut the hole for the inlay as well as the inlay. I cut the inlays first, and as you will see, I'm using double back tape to capture the inlay once it is cut free of the inlay material. To help maximize my output of the inlays, I put what will be a center line on each of the inlay material slats to line the template. I plunge the router bit down, the depth of which is slightly greater than the thickness of the material. I try to maintain the same orientation of the router to the template in cutting all of the inlays. In case the router bit might be a little bit off center, I won't get any deviations between the different inlays. You'll note that to speed the process up, I'm not holding the template down with double back tape, but clamps now. After cutting all the inlays, it's a matter of prying up the bulk material and then liberating the inlays individually. After a while, you'll find out how much double back tape to use to speed this process up. After numerous repetitions, I got what I assumed would be enough of the inlay. I'm not sure how many inlays I would need. I did not do any pre-planning or layout prior to the start. Here I'm starting in on the tabletop. Pieces of mahogany that I had were 12 plus feet long, so I had to get the big sled out to help support the material to break it down. I ended up with 2 boards. Final dimension of the tabletop is roughly 30 inches by 14 inches. After I got some rough cut lengths, I took them to the planer and planed them down to 3/4 of an inch thick. After planing the thickness, I go back to the table saw to get a nice good glue edge, which I find I can do on the table saw if you've got a nice sharp blade. Glue up is pretty simple and straightforward. I'm using Titebond 3 glue because it dries with sort of a color of the mahogany. I find the mahogany to be very easy to work with. It's very stable and flat, and I use no cauls nor biscuits in this glue up. After the glue sets up, I cut the tabletop to basic width and length, cutting a little bit off of all 4 sides, then run it through the drum sander to clean up the joint and the glue squeeze out. As this table build was somewhat of an experiment, I didn't really know what I was doing with the layout. I spent way too much time and intricate detail in trying to figure out exactly where to place these inlays. In the end, I finally got good enough to set the template down by eye. You'll note too that I had to add some outriggers to my template so that I could get room to clamp the template down when using the larger router base. The process was to cut the delicate edge of the inlay hole with the 1/8 inch router on the small router, and then hog out the inside with the larger router using a 1/4 inch router bit. Now that I've got another hole for an inlay, the glue up is pretty straightforward. After each inlay was installed, I had to sand it down pretty much flush with the surface so that the template would lay true to the surface. I did not wait for the glue to set up. The inlay was secure in its slot, and the wet glue along with the sawdust helped fill in the gaps if there were any. I carry this process on, and you can see here some areas that I want to cover up with another inlay. So I lay the template over the top of that and just put another inlay there. On to working on the legs, planing everything down to 3/4 of an inch and then ripping to the width. For the leg design, I laid out a full-size sketch so that I could capture the angles. Here I am capturing the angle from the drawing and transferring it over to the saw so that I can cut the angle for the joint. After setting up the angle, it's just a matter of cutting the members to length. I'm reinforcing the joints with dowels. Although my drawing and sketch showed 3 dowels, I only ended up using 2. Those that follow my channel will note that this is the same technique I used to make the joints for the legs on the spalted maple coffee table. As a matter of fact, it's the same drawing. Here's a quick test fit, and then I finally did the glue up. Note that I'm using cutoffs from the legs as clamping cauls to get a square bearing surface. Once the glue sets up, it's time to do a little shaping on the legs now. I started the drill press using a Forstner bit to get the inside tight radiuses cut. Then I move over to the bandsaw, knock off the sharp corners, and connect the tight radiuses, tapering the legs themselves. While at the bandsaw, I do a little shaping of the tabletop as well. After doing some smoothing and shaping at the oscillating belt sander, I take it to the router table and everything gets a 3/8 inch roundover. The top will be screwed on from underneath. I'm counterboring the holes in the legs for the screws now. The front leg gets screwed to the 2 side leg assembly. I'm counterboring the hole for the screws here. I glued and screwed the leg assembly together, although I don't think the glue is going to get me much benefit. I glued and screwed the top on as well. After gluing the plugs in, I then sand them off. And then I apply 2 coats of hard oil number 9. And that, my friends, is another successful table build. As always, thanks for watching and happy woodworking.